The stories in this YouTube channel will help you in your study of English. You can understand them if you know the 500 words most often used in the English language at the elementary level. But first, you already know what to do. Subscribe and enjoy this video. This is a story about a young boy who had a wonderful idea. Pictures Through the Air, Part 1. One of the most interesting stories about television begins in the year 1922 in the little town of Rigby, Idaho. Rigby was the home of Philo. Philo was 16 years old. He was very shy and didn't talk too much to anyone. But one of his teachers, Justin, knew that there was something different about him. Justin said many years later, "I had known hundreds of boys before I knew Philo, but Philo was different from all the others. I felt that I would never know another boy like him." The shy boy who didn't talk much to anyone, did talk with Justin, his science teacher. "I want to learn all about science," Philo said. He began to study science with the first-year class. After a few days, he appeared in the fourth-year class also. "I just want to sit and listen," he said. Philo studied very hard and soon he knew everything that the fourth-year class was learning. Then he read all the science books in the school library. He seemed to understand everything that he read. One day after school, Justin found Philo in the schoolroom working at the blackboard. Philo had covered the blackboard with drawings. "What are you doing?" asked Justin, with interest. "What are these drawings about?" "I want to invent things," Philo answered, "and these are the drawings of my first invention." "And what is your invention?" Justin asked, smiling a little. "I have an idea for television. For a way of sending pictures through the air," the boy answered. "Please, let me tell you about it. You are the only person who can understand what I have done." In 1922, radio was very new. The United States had fewer than 30 radio stations. But in 1922 a boy of 16 showed his teacher drawings for television. It was amazing. In the school library, Philo had read the story of a man who had worked on an idea for television, but the man had not succeeded in sending pictures through the air. Philo was sure that his own idea was better and that he would succeed where the other man had failed. Justin was not so sure, and he asked Philo many questions about the drawings. Philo could answer all his teacher's questions. He could give all the facts and figures. At the end of that school year, the Philo family left the little town of Rigby, and he did not see his science teacher again for many years, not until the most important moment of the young inventor's life. The big chance. In 1926, Philo worked as an office boy in Salt Lake City. Many important businessmen came into the office where he worked. One of these was George Everson, a businessman from San Francisco. Like Justin, George soon became interested in Philo. The shy, hard-working boy was not like other office boys whom George had known. One evening, George asked Philo to have dinner with him. At dinner Philo began to talk about his idea for television. George was not much interested in the invention at first. He listened only because he wanted to be kind to the boy. Many years later, George wrote a book about interesting people he had known. In the book, he told about that evening with Philo. As Philo talked, he seemed to change, George wrote. His eyes lighted up, and he was not shy at all. He talked freely about his invention and about what he wanted to do with it. As he talked, he became a different person. He was no longer an office boy, he was a man of science. At the end of the evening, George was more interested than ever in Philo. He was also interested in Philo's idea for television. A few days later, he took Philo to San Francisco. There George brought together a number of important businessmen, and Philo told them about his invention. The men became so interested in the young inventor and in his invention that they gave $25,000 to help him work on his idea. Philo was only 20 years old, but now he could stop working as an office boy. He could work on his idea for television. He would have the chance to try it out, and perhaps he would succeed in sending pictures through the air. A letter to Washington. But first, he must write a letter and send drawings of his invention to the United States government in Washington, D.C. He must ask for a patent on the invention. The person who first has the idea for a new invention and makes drawings of it is given a patent, then no other person can own the same idea or sell it. Only the United States Patent Office can say who is first with a new invention, and only the Patent Office can give an inventor the United States patent rights on an invention. So Philo sent his drawings to Washington and wrote a letter asking for the patent rights on television. Pictures Through the Air, Part 2. Who was really the first to invent television? A New York inventor named Vladimir was also working on television. Many years earlier, he had been a student of the man whose work Philo had studied in the school library. Now, Vladimir was working for a big radio company in New York. The president of the company was interested in Vladimir's ideas for television and gave him money to try them out. Vladimir in New York and Philo, almost 3,000 miles away, in California, knew nothing of each other's work or ideas. But the United States Patent Office knew that both were working on the same invention and that some of their most important ideas were the same. At last, Vladimir and Philo learned about each other's work. At once they asked the Patent Office in Washington to say who should have the patent rights to television. If he should succeed in sending pictures through the air, he could become the head of a great new business and a rich man. Very soon the Patent Office asked the two men to come to Washington for a hearing. The important question at the hearing would be quite simple: which man could prove that he had been the first to invent television? Before going to Washington, Philo and his lawyer got ready for the hearing. At first, it seemed that Philo would not be able to prove that he had worked on television before he went to San Francisco. But he knew that he had started his work years earlier. I suppose the first drawing that I ever made of television was in 1922, Philo told his lawyer. Can you bring that drawing to the hearing? His lawyer asked. It was made on a blackboard one day after school. Did anyone else see it? Yes, my teacher, Justin. Where is he now? I don't know. But he is the only person who can help you, Mr. Philo, said the lawyer. And so the search for Justin began. At last, he was found teaching science in a school in Salt Lake City. At the hearing in Washington, Philo's lawyer first showed that Philo had not seen or heard from his teacher for many years, not since Philo's school days in the little town of Rigby. Then the lawyer said, Mr. Justin, I want you to remember the time when Philo was a student of yours. Did he ever tell you of an invention that he called television? He did. Can you remember what Philo told you about that invention? He stood up and went to a blackboard. On it he put the same drawings that Philo had made years before, on the blackboard in the schoolroom at Rigby. Then Vladimir's lawyer asked Justin many questions about the drawings. Philo's science teacher could give every fact and figure of the television system, which the 16-year-old boy had explained to him. Because Justin remembered everything that Philo had told him, the patent rights to television were given to Philo. Since then, television has become a big and an important business in the United States and all over the world. The later work of Vladimir and Philo has been of equal importance, and the present system of television uses the best ideas of both men. Philo's success came to him partly through his own great genius, but partly it came through the help of two good friends, George, the businessman who took a young boy to see a number of other businessmen in San Francisco, and made them believe in him. The other was Justin, the science teacher, who knew a genius when he saw one and remembered every word that the genius had said to him. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video. Bye.